What would you do if you learned that your family was carrying a curse and you only had a few days left before it moved on to you? Or if you happened to find yourself having a job working at a museum full of cursed objects, wondering if the next day might be your last? Or if your spouse happens to bring home a Ouija board and doesn't listen to your heating to put it away? Or if you find yourself living in a cabin surrounded each night by skinwalkers as they get closer and closer to taking you away? Or, finally, if you found yourself working as a park ranger only to realize that all of these cryptids, all of these things hiding in the woods are real. And not only that, but you have to help keep the secret now too. Hello, I'm Cece, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have 5 more scary Reddit stories for you. If any of those stories sounded interesting, please make sure to stick around till the end of the video to see what happens. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to comment your thoughts down below. Tell me if you enjoy the videos, tell me if you don't, and why. I really appreciate all the support that the recent videos have gotten. And as always, if you enjoy, please make sure to subscribe for more daily content. I love you all. And with that, the stories. What would you do if every 10 years someone in your family died on the same day? Hello, I'm Cece, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. The title of today's story is There is Always a Death in My Family on November 13th, and it was uploaded to the r/NoSleep subreddit by Practical Captain 58. And it starts like this. My name is Dustin, and in my family, the date, November 13th, has always spelled death. In 1994, it was my grandmother. In 2004, my stepmother. In 2014, my father. Every 10 years, like clockwork, each death darker than the last. And now, it's November 12th, 2024. Just a few hours left until midnight. I haven't slept in 3 days. I remember the first death vividly. I was just 10 years old in 1994 when Grandma passed. 5 days before she died, she kept saying someone was standing near the main door, then near her bedroom. We thought it was just her poor eyesight or dementia. She could barely see the food on her plate, after all. But she'd interrupt her own stories, glancing nervously at nothing in particular, whispering, "She's come again." One night, while she was telling me her usual bedtime tale, she stopped mid-sentence, stared at the hallway, and started gasping for breath. I remember panicking, fetching water, calling her name, splashing her face. She finally opened her eyes and whispered in terror, "She's going to kill me." The woman standing right by the attic stairs. I looked. There was no one. I told her so. She said, "Look again. The glass of water will fall off the dresser." I turned back to look at her. "There's nothing happening, Grandma. The glass is right there." And the moment those words left my mouth, crash, the glass hit the floor and shattered. I screamed and ran. The bedroom door slammed shut behind me. My parents didn't believe me. "You imagined it," they said. "You're just a child." But I knew something terrible was coming. 2 days later, we found her body in the attic room, curled up in the far corner, her eyes and mouth wide open, frozen in fear. I was never the same again. By the time I was 20, life had drained any concept of normal from my soul. I came home from college one evening and rang the doorbell. No one opened the door. I used the spare key. The first thing I noticed was that the attic door, always shut, was slightly ajar. Inside, under the rafters, where Grandma had died, sat my stepmother. Her back was rigid, and her face turned away. She was rocking slowly, muttering. I called her name. No response. I stepped in closer. Her skin was pale. Her lips quivered. Then she turned and whispered, "Your grandmother told me everything. She won't leave us alone. She'll kill us all." Over and over, like a chant. I tried pulling her away, but she felt impossibly heavy, like she had sunk into the floor itself. When I finally got her out of the attic room, the dresser inside rattled. Then, a glass flew off and shattered, just like before. She pushed me out, slammed the attic door shut, and locked it. I called my father, who rushed home. His face was pale, almost icy. Without a word, he handed me a bundle of white cloth, shroud fabric. Then he walked to the closet, pulled out incense sticks, and murmured on the phone, "Yes, the strongest ones. Lavender base if possible." Then to me, "Stay away from the attic. I'm going to break the door." I will never forget what I saw next. My stepmother, hunched under the slanted ceiling, was chewing on glass. Blood ran down her chin. She smiled at us, but her eyes were weeping. Before we could stop her, she slit her own throat with a glass shard. Blood sprayed across the walls. She bled out within minutes. The date? November 13th, 2004. My father arranged the funeral, forbidding me from going near her body. He tried to keep me safe. But no one can protect you from something like this. By 2014, as the next November approached, I live in constant dread. Every creak in the house made me flip on all the lights. I avoided mirrors, shut the attic, and barely slept. On the night of November 9th, my father seemed different. Quiet. He didn't speak much, didn't eat. On the 10th, he locked himself in his room. By the 11th, he wouldn't even respond when I knocked. I found him talking to himself in the garden, seated under the old oak tree, the attic key in his hand. He said he was speaking to her, the one who hunted us, begging her to spare me, apologizing for the past. That night, he made tea and hummed lullabies, too calm. On the night of the 12th, I fed him dinner and stayed in his room. When he went to the bathroom, I waited, but he didn't come back. I knocked. No response. I broke the door. Inside, the walls were scratched, with one line repeated over and over. It was my fault. My father was gone. I saw the garden window open. Rushing outside, I found him kneeling in the dirt, muttering prayers. Then suddenly, he began digging, bare hands tearing into soil. I tried to pull him away, but he shoved me back with a strength I didn't know he had. He lay inside the shallow pit and whispered, "Take care of yourself. She's come for me." Then, he grabbed a nearby brick and smashed his own skull. He died before I could scream. That brings us to now. It's November 12th, 2024. Nearly midnight. I must have dozed off despite everything. When I woke, I heard voices. The house was full. Relatives, dozens of them. They were smiling, chatting like it was a celebration, but no sound came from their mouths. I stepped out of my room and into the hallway. No one noticed me, until they all did. Every face turned towards me. Then came through the crowd my grandmother, my stepmother, my father. They walked up to me, their eyes sunken, their expressions blank. Grandmother whispered, "It's your turn now, Dustin. You can't escape." I woke up, screaming. It was 9:40 p.m. Then I heard it. The attic door creaked open. The scent of incense, the same night-blooming jasmine, which was there for every death, filled the air. A diary lay on the attic floor. Inside it, handwriting I'd never seen before, a confession. The woman I'd called mother all my life wasn't. She was my father's second wife. My real mother was my father's first wife, and she'd died shortly after giving birth to me, poisoned, dehydration induced by a night-blooming jasmine, left to suffer, bound in the attic. My grandmother had arranged it. She wanted a daughter-in-law with a dowry, and when my mother became inconvenient, they got rid of her. As I read those last entries, I looked up. A woman stood in the attic corner, not threatening, not angry, just looking at me, calmly, in peace. Maybe I'll survive tonight, because vengeance has already been served. The end. That was a super interesting story. It made me think a lot of, there's this movie called Truth or Dare, where basically they just keep having to play Truth or Dare or they die. In the end, one of the last surviving characters, the whole movie has been kind of like a influencer on social media, and so they have this great following. And she kind of goes on live and tells them all to start playing Truth or Dare. Because it's revealed in the movie that you die in the order backwards from when you started the game. So the newer the person is in the game, the more soon they will die. So because she's now invited millions of people to play it, she's bought herself some time. With that being said, if I was in this scenario, let me rephrase that. If a man was in this scenario, you could, theoretically, marry a woman, or marry someone, and then adopt a bunch of kids really quickly. And I'm not saying this is ethical, and I'm not saying you should do this if you're in this situation, but you could, if you only cared about prolonging your life, do that. And then I'd say it'd probably be, more of a chance that you wouldn't die each time. Now, if you're a woman, it seemed like the ghost throughout the story was only targeting the dad's family. It was the dad's mom, then the dad, then the stepmom, and then the dad, and now finally the son. So if you're a woman, I would think if it was kind of a family curse type of deal, then you could just get married and be a part of a different family, and now, there you go. Curse solved, right? Also, throughout the story, I kind of thought that maybe it was attached to the house. Why, after so much death in this house, would you stay? That's just kind of crazy to me. Why, after not one supernatural death, would you not just leave? That's just crazy to me. If there was a supernatural death in my house, I'm out of there. Okay? So at the end, when we realize that it's the protagonist's mother who's been kind of trying to get vengeance this whole time, I do think that the protagonist has a much better way out. Now, if you knew that this was going to happen, and every 10 years, maybe the first time you're like, okay, that's kind of weird. Then with a stepmom, you're like, okay, that's 2 on the same day. And then the dad, it's like, okay, 10 years on the day, 100%, I'm next. Why would you stay? Now you're all alone, and why would you stay in this house? What are you even thinking? So if there's any great big change you could make that would have been easy and not involving, potentially getting a bunch of kids killed, why would you even just stay in this house? I think I'd take it right away and say, okay, this house is the problem. I'm leaving. Bye. And then if it follows you, you make a new plan from there. Kind of moving towards our lesson that we can learn from the story. 1, don't kill your wife. Marry a person that is going to get along with your family and that your family is going to get along with them. Ideally, right? If your plan is to stay very close to your family, then you ought to pick a spouse that is going to be good for them. And them. It will be good for them, for your family. Right? So, if the father had 3 wives throughout the story, the first being the mother of the protagonist, then the second being the mother that they thought was their mother, and then the third being the stepmom, I don't think it's insane to think this is the type of dude that would get a divorce. Because I know in some people's heads it's just never, ever, never an option, right? But if he ends up doing it later, then I don't know why, if it was such a big deal for the family, to not just get a divorce. But anyways, the lesson is learn to speak up for yourself. Learn to be willing to stand up for what you believe in and those who you choose to love. I think a lot of this responsibility falls on the father. 1, he chose the girl, knowing that she didn't have what the family wanted. Then He got her close to the family, close enough that the grandma decided to kill her because she wasn't what the grandma wanted for the son. I think that's just completely irresponsible. I think it's completely irresponsible to say that the father would just let it happen if for so much love he had in his heart, he wanted to go against what his mom wanted for him, that he would choose this girl that's not what she wanted for him. Why would he let her go through with it if he knew about it? I would assume he knew about it if there was so much junk going on. So, take responsibility. Take responsibility for those who you love. Stand up for them. Be willing to speak on their behalf, to stand up for their honor. Be willing to stand up for your own honor and defend your actions. If you don't want to die for something or someone, why are you doing it? Why are you associating with it? If you aren't willing to fight and protect the thing, it's okay to have minor opinions. That's fine. It's okay to not be willing to die for every single thing that you believe in. But I would feel that if you are willing to look somebody in the eyes and take them and have them and hold them for the rest of your life, you should be willing to die for them. And I feel that in that vein, you should be willing to stand up for them if it comes time for your family to not like them. Now again, ideally, but in the beginning, you just pick someone that your family likes. So with all that, what would you have done differently had you been in this story? Would you have done anything differently? Would you have thought to change anything that I said? What did you learn from this story? Has there ever been a time in your life where you needed to stand up for someone? Let me know down in the comments below. I appreciate all your thoughts, and I make sure to respond to all of them. What would you do if the museum you worked in had rules to keep the things inside, not out? And if each night that you worked, you learned more and more that the objects you had to protect were cursed? Hello, I'm CC, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. The title for today's video is I manage a museum full of cursed objects. My boss says it's just junk from the old country, and is uploaded to the r/no sleep subreddit by Cowboy Baby. Without further ado, the story. I work at a haunted item museum, or at least that's what the sign out front says. In reality, it's more of a tourist trap than a real museum. The place is crammed with random stuff from floor to ceiling, half of it probably from yard sales and old basements. Shelves sag under the weight of cracked dolls, tarnished mirrors, and jars of who knows what. Half the collection isn't even listed in the old ledger on my desk, and the entries that are there are written in handwriting so messy it might as well be a secret code. My job is a strange mix of tour guide, storyteller, and reluctant salesman. I lead curious visitors through the narrow aisles, spinning the histories of the so-called haunted items. Sometimes someone will make an offer, usually after a few drinks and a dare, and if the price is right, we'll let the item go. We always warn them, of course. We explain what the object is said to do, what it's done to previous owners, and how it's probably best left behind. But warnings have a way of making people more interested, not less. Most walk out clutching their authentic cursed treasure. Laughing, some come back a little less cheerful. We've got a strict no-return policy. Once an item leaves the building, it's officially your problem. You'd be surprised how many people tried to test that rule. If I had $1 for every time someone's grandma came storming back through the door, clutching a vintage doll or plushie she bought for her grandkids, I'd probably have enough to buy a real museum. They always say the same thing. It started moving on its own. Or, the eyes just keep following me. I just smile and point to the sign behind the counter. No refunds, no exchanges, no exceptions. If I had to count how many times that's happened, I'd run out of fingers. And honestly, we probably have an item somewhere in storage that could help with that too. My favorite case so far has to be this dad, who bought what he thought was a collectible Action Man figure. It turned out to be a cheap knockoff listed in my notebook as Veteran Man. I warned him that we weren't entirely sure what it did, but he just laughed and said his kid loves soldier toys. A few days later, he came bursting back into the shop, the doll in one hand, and his kid being dragged across the floor with the other. The kid was shouting in what I could only assume was fluent Vietnamese. That's when I decided maybe we'd finally figured out what Veteran Man actually did. Of course, there wasn't much I could do for him. I just pointed at the sign behind the counter. No refunds, no returns, no exceptions. He stood there, face bright red, before turning around and storming out of the museum. Some people just do not read the fine print. Not everything in here is some silly little trinket that makes you start speaking in Asian dialect overnight. Most of the stuff we've got probably doesn't do anything at all, just old junk with spooky stories attached to make tourists open their wallets. But every now and then, something actually works. And when it does, it's rarely harmless. If I had to guess, I'd say about half of what's in here is just dead weight, and at least a quarter of the rest could probably kill you in some creative and unpleasant way. Stuff like that is probably the main reason I want to share my experiences here. I've been the only employee for maybe 2, maybe 3 months now, and honestly, I like it that way. The guy who worked here before me disappeared one day without a word. No call, no note, nothing. I figure that's what happens when you don't follow the rules of this place, but I'll get to that later. It's a calm job, all things considered. A few tourists wander in every day, poking around, taking pictures, pretending to not be freaked out, and even when the place is empty, it never really feels that way. There's this low hum in the air, like the building itself is breathing. You start to get used to it after a while. As for my boss, I don't worry much about him. Walter only shows up once a week, always at the same time, always dressed like he's going to a funeral. That suits me fine. Gives me plenty of time to enjoy the quiet, or whatever passes for quiet in a place like this. The owner of this place is an older guy I've come to think of like a grandfather. He's the kind of man who looks like he walked straight out of an old photograph, always dressed in the same perfectly pressed black tuxedo, with a bloody red bow tie patterned like something out of a gothic dinner party. I've never seen him wear anything else. His head is completely bald, polished to a shine so bright it could probably qualify as one of the anomalies we keep on display. Despite his appearance, he's a genuinely kind man. Soft-spoken, patient, and always carrying this calm air that somehow makes the weirder parts of the museum feel a little less unsettling. I still don't know why he decided to hire me. I had zero experiences with antiquities, history, or the supernatural, but he just smiled during the interview and said, "You'll do just fine." I'm not sure if he meant the job or something else entirely. His real name is something I've never been able to pronounce. It's long, full of strange sounds that don't quite fit in my mouth, and I'm pretty sure it has something to do with whatever old country he's from. He never corrects me when I get it wrong. He just laughs that quiet, warm laugh of his. So, I started calling him Walter. He seems fine with it. Honestly, he looks like a Walter anyway. He always shows up at the end of the work week, like clockwork, carrying that same calm smile. He hands me a neat little stack of crisp bills, usually around $1,500, and tells me to keep up the good work. Sometimes, he slips in a little extra, or a lollipop, like some kind of reward for surviving another week in his madhouse. It's the kind of gesture you'd expect from a grandpa, if your grandpa happened to run a haunted museum and never seemed to age a day. He doesn't like talking about the museum much. I've tried asking him where all this stuff comes from, but he always dodges the question. Tourists have tried too. Some get bold after a few ghost stories and ask if the place is actually haunted, or if he brought everything over from somewhere specific. He just chuckles, waves a hand, and says, "It's all just junk from the old country." Then, he changes the subject before anyone can ask what country that actually is. I stop pressing after a while. Some things here are better left unexplained. Of course, this wouldn't be a proper haunted museum without a few rules to follow. Like I mentioned earlier, the first one's simple. Every morning before opening, I have to draw a straight white line across the doorstep. Nothing fancy, just one solid stroke with a piece of chalk. Walter insists on it, says it's a tradition. So, every day, I grab the old brick of chalk from the drawer and drag it across the entrance until there's a clean, even mark. I'm not really sure what it's for. Maybe it's some old superstition from the old country, or maybe it's just to keep the more superstitious tourists entertained. I've noticed a few people stop dead the second they see it, like they suddenly remember they left the oven on or something. They turn right around and leave without saying a word. Maybe the line keeps something out, or maybe it keeps something in. The next rule is about the necklace Walter gave me on my first day. He called it my protective gear. His exact words were, "Ever heard of Chernobyl? Treat this as your protective suit." I laughed at the time, but he didn't. It's a simple thing, an oval-shaped charm, white as bone, maybe made of bone for all I know. 3 lines of strange symbols are carved across it, shallow but sharp enough to catch the light. I've asked him what the markings mean, but he just smiles and says, "They keep you from becoming part of the collection." I'm not entirely sure if he's joking. Either way, I don't take it off. Not even when I leave for the night, especially not then. The third rule is probably the creepiest one, and it's about not answering anything when I'm alone. No voices, no calls, no knocks, nothing. If something makes a sound when there's nobody else in the museum, I'm supposed to ignore it completely. Walter never really explained why. He just looked at me with that polite little smile and said, "Best not to be polite to what doesn't exist." I'm guessing some of the items here don't like being ignored and like to see if they can get a reaction. Sometimes, late at night, I'll hear faint tapping from one of the back rooms, or a whisper that sounds like it's coming from the vent. The first few times I almost called out, just out of instinct, but then I remembered the rule. Now I just keep my head down and pretend I didn't hear a thing. So far, it's worked. There are also a bunch of rules about the objects themselves, of course. Those are harder to keep straight, mostly because there are so many of them, and new ones show up more often than you'd think. That's where the old notebook comes in handy. Whoever kept it before me did a pretty good job of logging everything that enters, leaves, or somehow finds its way back here. One of the big ones in there is Rule B45, feed the talking head. I call him Gordon. He sits in a glass case near the back, and you have to feed him at least once every 2 weeks. The notebook doesn't say what happens if you don't, and I don't plan on finding out. Now, Gordon will eat anything. Metal, plastic, wood, you name it, he'll grind it up like a garbage disposal. But that's where the warning comes in. Only feed him something you'd be willing to eat yourself. Nothing sharp, nothing toxic, nothing you'd find under a workbench. I usually give him a sandwich or a Snickers bar. He seems to enjoy the crunch of the peanuts. The story goes that the last kid who tried to feed him nails or springs got ripped apart from the inside not long after. Whether that's true or not, I'm not taking any chances. Gordon's got a mean bite for something without a body. D9 is the typewriter. It's an old black Remington model that still works somehow. The rule for that one is simple. Never read what it types out on its own. I've seen it start clacking by itself after closing. Keys moving like invisible fingers are at work. Once, I peeked at the paper and saw my name halfway down the page before I yanked it out and burned it. It's been pretty quiet since then. J4 is the snow globe. I like to think of it as the museum's own weather report. Shake it once gently, and the little flakes start following. Shake it twice, and a storm rolls in somewhere outside. I can only imagine what would happen if it breaks. And then there's K0. No description, no nickname, just a thick black line in the notebook. I asked Walter about it once. He just smiled, tapped the page twice with his finger, and after thinking for a minute, he just said, "Something's never leave. So yeah, that's what I do for a living. Not exactly a dream job, but it pays well enough. And honestly, it's never boring. I'm writing this down during my break, and then I should probably get back to work soon before something decides I've been gone too long. Anyways, take care out there, and if you ever stumble across a little out-of-the-way museum filled with haunted artifacts and a chalk line across the door, come say hi. Just make sure you can actually cross the line first. The end. I really like that story. I found it super interesting. It was almost like a little museum full of SCPs, in a way, if you know what that is. I think it's cool to think of how many maybe cursed or magical objects there might be out there. It's also cool to think that a lot of them are kind of non-normal, or ones that you might not hear or see in media a lot. I like the snow globe. I like the head that eats stuff. Man, would you work in a haunted museum for $1,500 a week? Now that is the question. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. I think I could do it. But I think the protagonist in this story is really smart in that they are not asking a lot of questions, and they're not poking around where they shouldn't be. I think in this situation, that's basically the best thing that you can do. I think if you truly wanted a job like this, just don't ask questions. And if you are not okay with that, this is probably not the thing for you. I think when you're in a situation like this, I haven't been in very many, of course, but if you're in a situation like this, the best thing you can do is listen and not try and find loopholes. I think that kind of transitions us great into the lesson for today's story. I myself am definitely a smart aleck, somebody who looks for a lot of loopholes in just about everything I can. I like it. I like the thought that I kind of bested somebody else, whoever wrote the rules. When I was in junior high, I had this math teacher who said that we had this math textbook, and if you did the assigned page, and then you did a few questions off of the next page, then you get, half a point of extra credit per extra question you did. So anyways, here comes to the end of the year, and I didn't have a great grade, and my friends didn't have a great grade. So basically, I stayed up all night one night, and I did the whole math book, and I got, enough extra credit that I got an A. But I went in there and I said, hey, if I did a little bit of extra credit, and my friend helped me, and my two friends were there and they helped me, could we kind of split the points for the extra credit? He said, oh yeah, that sounds good. So I turned it all in and we all got A's. It was free. So I really enjoyed that because I kind of used the rules that he had proposed against him. But I think if this story has taught me something, and what I hope it might teach you, is sometimes the rules are there for a reason. A lot of the times the rules are there for a reason. And a lot of the times, if you stick your leg over the line, you might just step on a mine that if you would have just listened to the no trespassing, or listened to the stay 50 feet back, you wouldn't have encountered. I think sometimes we're so blinded by trying to be better or be smarter or whatever else that we don't understand that maybe the person who made the rules had good intentions in mind. Now, does that mean that all rules out there have good intentions? No. But I think what we can learn here is that sometimes they do. Sometimes the rules are there for a reason, and sometimes it's better that we don't find out why they're there. With that, please let me know what you think of that down below. Let me know if there's ever been a time when you've tried to overtake a loophole. Let me know if you got a different lesson and what you'd do differently. Would you take this job? What would you do if your partner came home drunk, but something in their eyes wasn't human anymore? And then, before you knew it, you were stuck, playing with a Ouija board. Hello, my name's CC and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. Today's story is entitled, My Husband Brought a Ouija Board Home. It changed our lives forever. and it was posted to the r/no sleep subreddit by Horror Junkie 123. And it starts like this. My husband, Connor, and I have always been huge horror aficionados. Ever since I was a child, I've been a huge fan of the gruesome and the macabre. Almost anything goes. Almost. Connor knows that I have only one rule when it comes to Halloween. No clowns. And absolutely no Ouija boards. Not in the house, not in the yard, not in the forest behind our home. But apparently, even though I have been drilling it into him since we started dating, that was too difficult for him to understand. Hey babe, I'm home, Connor said, tossing his keys into the bowl by the door. Welcome back, I replied from my place on the couch. So you'll never guess what I won as a prize at work today, he said as he rounded the corner. My heart dropped the second he came into view. No, get it out of my house, I snapped, pointing to the door. Connor's expression dropped, the Ouija board falling to his side. But I thought it'd be fun. Just this once. I made eye contact with him, a raging fire in my eyes. Connor, you know how I feel about Ouija boards. I had a traumatic experience when I was a kid. Now please do as I ask and get it out of the house. I don't want that thing anywhere near me. Connor sighed. Fine. You win. It's going back in my truck, he said, disappearing from view. I picked up my wine glass and took a large swig. I love that man, but he really knows how to push my buttons. We both had off to work the next day. We were each hanging out with separate friend groups, so I didn't know what he was up to. I trusted him. Part of me wishes I hadn't. His poor decisions that night changed our lives forever. When Connor got home, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The kids had spent the night at their grandparents' house, so it was just the two of us. I thought that maybe after Connor tumbled into bed, we might have a little bit of time to ourselves. I was dead wrong. I was already lying down by the time Connor walked through the door. I had been snuggled under the covers with the lights off, doom scrolling on Instagram and waiting to make sure that he made it home safely. I listened as the front door opened and shut. Then, I heard the faint creak of the stairs. It sounded like he was trying to be quiet, which I appreciated. He was being considerate because I might be asleep. Now, I know that wasn't the reason. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. I heard shuffling, as if someone was pacing back and forth. I kept expecting the door to open and for my husband to be standing there, a big, goofy grin plastered across his face. But that didn't happen. I wanted to yell out to him, or turn on the bedside lamp, but it felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I took my eyes off the door for even a second, something bad was going to happen. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, illuminated by nothing but my phone screen. Then, just as I thought my heart might explode from anticipation, it happened. The doorknob started to turn. The door creaked open, and I could make out the silhouette of my husband standing in the entryway. He didn't say a word to me. He bolted over to the bed, kicked off his shoes, and threw himself beneath the covers, facing the wall. I was stunned. It had all happened so fast. Honey, is everything okay? He didn't answer. He just nodded his head. I couldn't shake that feeling that something was deeply wrong. This behavior wasn't like the Connor that I knew. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something, to give me some sort of explanation, but he didn't move. He just stayed there, still as a statue. I didn't take my eyes off him until I heard him start to snore. Eventually, I lulled myself into a false sense of security. I had to in order to get to sleep. I told myself that Connor was just wasted. His friends did drink quite a bit when they hung out. That thought helped put my mind at ease until the next morning. I awoke to find his side of the bed empty. The smell of bacon wafting up the stairs from our kitchen immediately caught my attention. My assumption about him must have been correct. Connor was hungover and needed some greasy food to get himself back to normal. I took my time getting ready before meeting him in the kitchen. He had his back to me when I took a seat at the table, a plate full of bacon sitting beside him on the counter. "Morning," he said, flipping a pancake. "Morning," You want to tell me what that was all about last night? I replied, eyeing him. He turned to face me, his brows furrowed. What do you mean? What do you mean, what do I mean? You came up to our room last night acting really weird. You didn't say a word to me. Then you went to sleep with your clothes on. Huh. I don't remember that. Must have been more drunk than I thought. There it was. I had no reason to worry. Thought so. How'd the boys' night go? I asked, starting to brew myself a cup of coffee. Decent. We got wasted and played with that Ouija board I won. Don't worry, I left it at Mike's house. My stomach dropped. Oh, really? And did you contact anything? I dreaded his answer. My throat had gone dry, and I suddenly found myself clinging to every word. I thought we did at one point, but I'm pretty sure it was just Aaron moving the planchette. He tried to pretend like it was this entity called Mr. Pip. So stupid, right? Cold sweat enveloped my entire body at the mention of that name. I had to sit down to stop myself from passing out. No, I muttered, head in my hands. This can't be happening, not again. Connor seemed okay after that. For the next week, I searched for any indication that he wasn't right, something to clue me in that this thing had returned. I watched him like a hawk. The only thing out of the ordinary was that Connor stayed in the bathroom for a suspiciously long time one day after work, but it turned out that he just had constipation from Taco Bell he'd eaten at lunch. Nothing paranormal about that. After a whole week passed, I let myself believe that Friday night was just a fluke. I should have been more careful. I came home that Monday after a grueling shift, ready to turn on a rom-com and pour myself a glass of Cabaret. I'm home, I shouted, kicking off my shoes. I received no response. That was odd. The kid should have been there, and Connor's car was in the driveway. I rounded the corner to the kitchen, brows knitted in confusion. My heart dropped when I found Alice and Tommy sitting at the table, their faces pale as sheets. Mom? Tommy whispered. His voice was low, as if he was afraid to speak too loudly. What is it, sweetie? What's wrong? I said, rushing over to him. It's Daddy, Alice interjected. She was choking back tears. He's being really scary. He told us to stay here and wait for him to get done. I was suddenly blanketed in a cold wave of dread. I didn't like where this was going. He didn't hurt you, did he? I asked, studying their expressions. They both shook their heads no. And I breathed a sigh of relief. All right, I'll go see what's wrong. Don't worry, okay? I won't let anything happen to you. They shared a glance before giving me a grim nod. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I proceeded towards my room. Just to be safe, I grabbed the baseball bat lying by the door that Tommy had forgotten to put away. My heart pounded in my chest with each step. I climbed. I don't know what I was going to find when I opened that door, but it certainly was not the scene that I walked into. I eventually reached the top landing and stood outside my bedroom. I pressed my ear to the door and listened, but I couldn't hear anything. Come on, Hannah. Just get it over with. It'll all be over soon. I mustered up every ounce of courage I had, and I burst into the room. I was shocked at what I saw. My husband stood in the front of the vanity mirror. He was applying a fresh layer of makeup, clown makeup. His face was stark white, with black streaks running down from his eyes like he'd been crying motor oil. He wore a polka-dotted jumpsuit with a red, scraggly wig and big, floppy shoes. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of nightmare. The second I entered, I froze, and he turned towards me. Connor, what is this? What are you doing? The clown began to giggle. It's been such a long time, Annie. It's good to see you again. He was using Connor's vocal cords, but that voice was not the one I knew. It was higher-pitched, yet soft, like an entertainer speaking to a child. All the color drained from my face as I raised the baseball bat, preparing to swing. That's not my name. You give me my husband back, you sick freak. The thing wearing my Connor's skin frowned, its big red lips drooping animatedly. Annie, is that really the way to treat your long-lost pal? Mr. Pip missed you. I couldn't take it anymore. I swung as hard as I could, tears blurring my vision. I missed, lurching forward as the bat crashed into the bed frame. I instantly knew that I had messed up. because a second later I felt the cool, sharp glint of a blade against my throat. "Listen here. You'll do what Mr. Pip asks, or he will drive the tip of this knife into your skull while your children watch. Do you really want that, Annie?" My breath hitched in my throat. "No." "Good," he said, shoving me away. "Downstairs. Now." I immediately thought to call the cops, but he was right behind me. I couldn't get to my phone without him seeing. Instead, I was forced to march down the stairs and over to the table where my children sat, petrified. The clown led me to the chair beside Tommy, while he claimed one beside Alice. My heart shattered for my baby girl. I couldn't imagine how scared she must have been. "Hello again, kids. Mr. Pip is happy to see you." He didn't receive a response. "I said," he growled, pounding his fist onto the table, "Mr. Pip is happy to see you." He scowled at my children, who each wore a horrified expression. I'm happy to see you too, Mr. Pip," Tommy murmured, avoiding eye contact. "Good. Was that so hard?" His large, exaggerated smile returned, as if it had never left. Tommy shook his head. "Now, Annie, if you'll be so kind, will you get Mr. Pip a glass of water? He's parched." I nodded. Before I stood, I slipped Tommy my phone under the table, praying he'd know what to do. Tommy was a smart kid. He was our only shot. "Did your children know that your mommy and Mr. Pip were on television together?" Annie was the star of the show. Though I wanted to scream with every fiber of my being, I didn't utter a peep. I simply poured a glass of water and walked back to the table. This thing, it was using my husband as a vessel to get to me. I just had to play into its little game, and everything would turn out okay, right? Mr. Pip," Tommy said, his voice shaky. "Yes, Tommy?" he replied, turning his attention to my son. "Can I go to the bathroom?" Our captor thought it over, eyes traveling to the ceiling, knife tapping absent-mindedly against his chin. "Mr. Pip supposes that would be all right, but hurry back. You wouldn't want to miss out on the fun." Tommy nodded, then trotted away, acting like he really had to pee. I couldn't have been more proud in that moment, but then I was reminded of the task at hand. I returned to the table and handed the glass of water to the clown who had my daughter at knife point. I watched as he took a sip. Then, my heart dropped. His face immediately twisted, and a deep frown overtook his countenance. He shot up from his chair, locking eyes with me. "This is warm." Without breaking eye contact, he smashed the glass on the floor. "Try again." I trembled as I did what he asked. I waited for the water to get cold, then I threw in a couple of ice cubes from the freezer for good measure. My hands shook as I handed over the new glass. The clown greedily snatched it up. He downed the entire thing, ice cubes and all, before looking me directly in the eyes. "Much better," he grinned. Something in that smile felt deeply sinister. It only grew wider as he smashed the second glass on the ground. "Take off your shoes." What? "Take off your shoes," he repeated, in a sickly sweet sing-song voice. I did as I was asked. "I don't take them off. You're making Mr. Pip very angry, Annie. You wouldn't want that now, would you?" he asked, his eyes falling to Alice. I shook my head no. I stripped off my shoes and tossed them aside. Socks too. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears as I obeyed his commands. "Now walk," he said, pointing to the room over. The twisted grin so wide that his face paint was cracking. "Please don't make me do this," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "Don't make Mr. Pip repeat himself. Walk." I glanced at him, through the tears, blurring my vision. He was standing behind Alice's chair now, knife on full display. I had to do this. I couldn't let him hurt my daughter. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and plunged my bare foot forward into the hundreds of glass shards shattering the floor. My eyes shot back open as the pain seared through my foot like lightning. I yelped instinctively, pulling it back. "Keep going," the clown demanded. The eager glimmer in his eyes made me want to vomit. He was revealing in this. I gritted my teeth and leaned on the table for support. I motioned to place my hurt foot back down, but I didn't get the chance. "Not that one. Now it's time to put your best foot forward," he cackled, his boisterous laughter reverberating off the walls. No one else so much as twitched. I turned back to find the knife pressed to Alice's side. Her eyes were wide, and her bottom lip was trembling. I didn't have a choice. I applied pressure to my injured foot, a debilitating pain roaring through every single synapse. I leaned even harder on the table, grateful, at least, for that tiny blessing. I hovered, my right foot over the broken glass for a moment before I took the next step. I released an audible shriek as my right foot was sliced to ribbons. A pool of blood had blossomed around me, mingling with the spilled water and glass fragments. Everything hurt. I nearly collapsed, but somehow I remained standing. I glared back at the sadistic clown holding a knife to my daughter's neck. Very good, Annie. I hated that voice. I hated him. But that phrase, as much as I loathed it, gave me a little sense of comfort. Maybe he was satisfied. Maybe. That was it. Now do it again. A cold dread swallowed me like a python. This couldn't be happening. What? You heard me, Mr. Pip said. Do it again. Stars swam in my vision as I glanced back at the mess on the floor. I was losing quite a bit of blood. I didn't know how much more I could take. I turned wincing as the glass shards shifted beneath my flesh, and I prepared to follow his command. The pain was so immobilizing that I felt like I was going to pass out. I lifted my left foot, droplets of blood falling to the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut. Police, drop your weapon. That sound was music to my ears. I looked at the thing in my husband's body. His smile had melted into a deep frown, but we were having so much fun. Oh well, goodbye, Annie, for now. I watched as the menacing glint left his eyes. His demeanor changed in an instant. The clown blinked a couple times, then his eyes fell to the knife. He seemed shocked to be holding it. He let it slip to the floor as the officers moved in. Hannah, what's going on? Why is there so much blood on the floor? Why am I wearing this? A new kind of horror struck me in that moment. My Connor was back. The sweet, loving husband and father that I knew. And he was being led away in cuffs. It's been 2 months since Connor's arrest, and I'm still having trouble processing what happened. It took me a long time to heal from my injuries. I needed stitches, and I had to stay off my feet for weeks. The kids haven't had any interest in visiting their father while he's been detained. I don't blame them either. His decision to use that Ouija board opened a wound that we can never close. The trauma inflicted that day will last a lifetime. Even so, I know that my husband isn't the bad guy. He's a victim too. Oh, how I wish I could just make all this go away. I want to go back to the beginning, to being that big, happy family again. But I know that we can't do that, and I have a feeling that as bad as things are now, they're just going to get worse, because I can't shake the last thing that clown told me from my head. Goodbye, Annie. For now. The end. What a good story. I think, first off, I would love to say that this woman is super awesome. I think that she is super emotionally intelligent. I think for her to have communicated this kind of phobia that she has for clowns and for Ouija boards to be great. I think a lot of people are almost scared or anxious about sharing their things like this with others, because if you've been so scarred by something to kind of develop a phobia, it can be kind of anxious to bring it up. And so I really appreciate that she was willing to do that, as well as be so patient when the husband brought that in the first place. I think that that's just another show of character right there. I think that's a great thing that we can learn from this story. Now, different things that we could have done. One, wife could have told the husband, no, don't just put it in the car. Don't ever, touch it again. We're going to burn it right now. And two, I think when she heard the same clown's voice, or the same clown's name, at least, the husband mentioned, when he said, oh yeah, we went over and played the game at the boy's house, and blah, 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 Mr. Pip, I think she should have tried to do some kind of intervention. Now, me personally, I believe in all this stuff. I believe there are demons out there and evil spirits and things that will latch onto you. I've seen it. I'm not just talking about in YouTube videos. I have seen it firsthand. I've seen how awful that can make someone's life. I've seen the lives of people around these people. But that's a story for another time. Those are stories for another time. With that being said, I don't know where this lady's faith is, but the existence of demons and things kind of implies the existence of a lot of other things. So, depending on where you lie and all that, depends on, I guess, what you would want to do to get rid of this from your husband. Now, again, if we would have changed some things earlier on, would the husband have been possessed? No. But, what could you do now? Well, you go find a priest and have it exorcised. You could pray. You could do a lot of things depending on what your faith is. Now, I think that there are a lot of evil spirits out there. And I think if you don't give them any energy, and if you don't try and invite them into you, and if you don't let them have any control, you are pretty well safe from them. Now, with that being said, if there is someone with an evil spirit, and they are too close to you, that evil spirit can obtain a hold on you as well. So you have to be very careful about the people that you associate with. I know people who live their lives very well for all of their life, and yet they were around a person who was possessed and just made physical contact with them, and then they themselves became possessed because the demon wanted the good person more. That's really scary. So basically, be careful. And if you are to believe in these things, I'd say make a plan. Now, to wrap this all up, the lesson that I think we can learn from this story is, 1, be patient. Be patient with the ones you love. There is definitely a line between being patient and having kind of a deadline and saying, you know what, no, I'm not going to stand for this. Being patient is one thing, but I need to stand up for myself. I think being patient is a very respectable virtue or attribute that we can have. But I think another lesson that we can learn from this is learning how to share our weaknesses with those who we love. So not only being patient with them, but trusting them. Loving them enough to say, this is where I'm weak, and I understand that you're strong in these areas, and together we can do it. We can do all the things, because together, I think it is innately human to think that we can do everything on our own. But I think as well, we have to come to the conclusion that we can't do everything on our own, and that's why we need somebody else. I think that's why marriage is super important, or being with someone. Because truly, we're each kind of a half to a circle. We're each a half to a whole. We will each have our strengths and weaknesses, but together, hopefully, we'll have more strengths than weaknesses. And hopefully, your strengths are complementary to your partner's weaknesses, and their strengths are complementary to yours. But you have to be patient, and you have to be strong enough to be weak. I think that there are so many people out there who are so convinced that they need to be strong all the time that they just end up becoming exhausted with it, playing this part, playing this character. Please, there are people around you that love you. Tell them. Tell them when you're weak. Tell them when you're not strong. Tell them what makes you weak. And be patient with them as they try and support you. If you don't have people who are there that you can reach out to, I mean this in the nicest, most kind, loving way that I can. It's not that hard to obtain some. It's not that hard to find people who care. Not everybody and their mama who is out there in the world is nonchalant and just doesn't give a darn about your problems. You can find people and open up. It's okay. And with all that, please, let me know down in the comments below. What would you have done differently had you been in this situation? What would you change? Would you have changed anything? What would you do if you suspected that someone close to you was possessed by a demon? What would you do if all your life you followed the rules to keep you safe from the forest, but one day you ended up seeing a creature wearing your face, but something about it was just eerily wrong? Hello, I'm CC, and welcome to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. Today's story is entitled My Dad's Rules for the Forest, and it was uploaded to the r/NoSleep subreddit by Grand Adventures. I grew up with rules, strict ones. There weren't about chores or bedtime or grades. They were about the forest. My dad posted them on the fridge like commandments, written in thick, black marker. No explanations, no discussions, just rules. Rule 1. If something calls your name from the trees, you don't answer. Rule 2. If you see someone who looks almost human, go inside immediately. Rule 3. When the woods go silent, so do you. Rule 4. Never open the door after dark. Not for anyone. Back then, I didn't think much about them. I thought my dad was just paranoid. A survivalist type, the kind of guy who kept extra locks on every door and food stored in the basement. But the older I got, the more I realized the rules weren't about imaginary dangers. They were about things he had seen. Things he didn't want me to see. The first time I understood that was when I was 12. It was late, maybe 1 in the morning. I woke up to a voice drifting through my bedroom window. Soft. Familiar. Hey, kiddo. Come outside. It sounded exactly like my dad. Same tone, same warmth. But it came from the wrong direction. My dad slept on the opposite side of the house, and the voice came from the woods. I froze, sitting upright, listening as the voice kept repeating the same line. Come outside. I need your help. Come outside. I need your help. I wanted to answer. I really did. The voice had that gentle, coaxing calm he usually used whenever I was scared or sick. But then I remembered Rule 1, so I stayed still, silent. Cold sweat running down my arms. After a minute, the voice changed. It sharpened. The softness vanished. Come outside. No warmth, no humanity, just the imitation wearing thin. Footsteps padded through the leaves, slow and deliberate. Then, something tapped twice on my window. Not hard enough to break it, just enough to let me know it knew exactly where I was. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I told my dad the next morning, and he didn't get angry. He didn't call me crazy. He just nodded as if he'd been waiting for that moment. That is why we follow the rules, he said quietly. They don't understand why we talk. They only know how to copy. That was all he said. He didn't tell me what they were, and I didn't have the courage to ask. As I got older, the rules made more and more sense. Once I was 15, the forest went silent in the middle of the afternoon. All at once. The birds, the wind, the insects, everything shut off, like someone hit a switch. I froze, remembering Rule 3. Across the clearing, something moved. It stepped out from behind a tree, tall, pale, and wrong. Its arms hung too low, its knees bent the wrong way, its face. Oh man, its face looked human, from far away, but as it came closer the details melted, like wet paint sliding down a canvas. It tilted its head at me, curious. I didn't scream, I didn't move, I just backed inside and locked the door. The thing stayed there for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the space where I had been standing. When I told my dad, he didn't act surprised, only tired. They're getting braver, he muttered. After that, he added a new rule. Rule 5, never go in the woods alone. But even rules have limits, and eventually the forest tests them. It happened last winter. I came home from school and found the house dark. Not unusual. Dad often chopped wood until sunset. But his axe wasn't by the stump. His jacket still hung on the hook. His boots were gone. Night fell, and he still wasn't back. Normally I wouldn't break Rule 4, but something felt wrong in my gut, like a string pulled tight. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. Dad? I called out. For a moment, only the wind answered. Then, I heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Relief washed over me, until a voice floated out between the trees. Kiddo, come help me. My stomach dropped. The tone was right, but the rhythm was off. Words hitting the wrong beats, like a song played with missing notes. The rule echoed in my head. If something calls your name from the trees, you don't answer. But this time, I needed it to be him. I needed to believe he was out there. "Dad?" I said again, voice cracking. The footsteps stopped. Then, the voice corrected itself. "Hey, kiddo, I need your help." Perfectly this time. Too perfect. I backed towards the door, but before I could reach it, another voice came from the opposite direction. Hoarse. Real terrified. "Don't listen to it." My dad burst from the tree line, limping, covered in dirt and scratches. Behind him, shadows rippled, fast, hungry shapes weaving between the trunks. He shoved me inside, slammed the door, and threw the deadbolt. Something hit the porch a second later, followed by scraping along the wood, slow drags testing the boards. My dad collapsed against the counter, panting. "They're learning," he whispered. "They almost had me." I wanted answers. I wanted to ask what they were, why they wanted us, why we lived here, instead of somewhere safe. But looking at him, pale, shaking, haunted, I realized the truth. He didn't have answers either, just rules. Rules that kept us alive. For a while. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no signs of struggle, no footprints. The forest was loud that day. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, wind swaying the branches as if nothing had happened. I waited for him to walk out from the trees with that smile he always wore. He never did. That night, something tapped on the window again. Soft and familiar. "Hey, kiddo, let me in." My father's voice. Perfect, gentle, and patient. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The tapping continued for hours. It still happens almost every night. Sometimes the voice sounds tired, sometimes angry, sometimes even pleading. But I follow the rules. I stay quiet, I stay inside, and I never open the door after dark, not for anyone, especially not for the voice that sounds exactly like my dad. The end. I really like that story a lot. I think it was definitely pretty simple, but at the same time, I think there's a lot to learn there. What could we have done differently? Well, the dad said, stay together. And although this boy is 15, and, these monster things could be super strong, or whatever else, the dad did say stick together, and so I think if there was something different that could have happened that maybe could have saved the dad, for who knows if the dad's still out there, or be captured, or whatever else, I think it would have been to stick together. 2 people are better than 1, even if the 2 people are less strong than the 1. I think understanding, again, this going back towards a lot of these creepy stories, kind of just learning and understanding that we have limitations. And so pushing people away in an effort to protect them isn't usually what ends up helping them, isn't usually what ends up helping us. It usually ends up just hurting us and them. And that's not even what we intended in the beginning. I think as guys, especially, and as men, it's super easy to want to be strong all the time and to not let the kind of manly facade crack at all. But we have to understand pushing people away in an attempt to maintain that strength or that kind of thing that we've worked on so hard to be, it doesn't help us. The only way that we can actually be strong most of the time is by understanding that we aren't strong all of the time. If we try so hard to be strong all the time and never give ourselves rest, you end up just being weaker than you could be. You end up just being exhausted from playing a part that you aren't. And I think that is a great thing to learn from this. I think it's also really cool to kind of understand the uncanny valley. Part of our genes, at some point in our genes, we must have had to adapt to understand what things are human and not human, but just slightly off. It's kind of like when you get that weird feeling in your gut when you see a mannequin that looks a little bit too real. I think that's why, for the most part, they stopped putting eyes on mannequins, and they're just kind of the blank white forms, or blank colored forms sometimes. But That's because I think there was a different species that was basically people, but at the same time it wasn't people. Maybe it was back in, caveman times or whatever else. But for some reason, we needed to be able to differentiate from them. And that's why I feel like it's so easy for us to understand when something is just a little off. Whether it be, I think it comes really into play when we see all of the AI content coming into the world today. And how, at least for me, I think it's really easy to tell the difference. I know that sometimes, and especially with the newer ones, and as it continues to progress, it will become harder and harder to differentiate. But what do we see wrong when we see most AI images? Something's wrong with the hands, something is wrong with the fingers, something's wrong with the eyes, something is wrong with the teeth. It's easy things to spot. It's things that should be normal. How many sets of eyes have you seen in your life? How many sets of teeth have you seen in your life? Have any of them been the same? Have you ever seen somebody with a lazy eye before? Or with teeth that could belong to a pirate? So why is it that when it's slightly off, we know it's slightly off, when in reality there's literally billions of different combinations of these things? It's super interesting to think about, and I'd love to make a video on it at some point. But anyways, with all that wrapped up, again, I think the lesson here is to ask for help and to realize that pushing people away doesn't help you. It just makes you weaker. What would you do if you found a staircase out in the middle of the woods and no one would tell you why it's there? And yet, the more you dig on it, the more you realize it's a part of something much, much bigger and much worse than yourself. Hello, I'm Cece, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. Today's story was posted to the r/NoSleep subreddit by Search and Rescue Woods, and it's entitled, "I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service, and I have some stories to tell." And it starts like this. People always imagine my job as search and rescue is simple. Find the missing hiker, escort them home, shake hands, and go back to the station. I wish it were that easy. I've seen things out there that don't make sense. Things no training manual can prepare you for. And the worst part is, no one warns you. They just let you learn the hard way. I've been doing this long enough to tell when a case is normal and when it's going to go bad. The normal ones follow a pattern. Someone slips, someone gets lost, underestimates the cold, something like that. But then, there are the others. The ones the other officers just call the weird ones. My first weird one was a kid who went missing while his mother was tying her shoe. She said she looked down for 3 seconds. When she looked up, he was gone. We searched for hours before we found him sitting beneath a fallen tree, completely calm. When I crouched beside him, he didn't look scared or relieved, just confused. "Where's the man who was walking with me?" he asked. I told him we'd been looking for him, and there was no man. He shook his head. He looked like my dad, but he didn't talk, he just walked. And when I asked where we were going, he smiled like this. The boy stretched his mouth real wide, showing too many teeth for a smile that innocent. I tried to hide my shiver. Later, when we reunited him with his actual father, the kid wouldn't go near him. He clung to his mom instead, staring at the tree line like someone was still watching him. That was the first time I realized people aren't the only things that walk those woods. Another time, we recovered a woman who had been missing for almost a week. Everyone assumed she'd died, but we found her standing perfectly still, miles from the trail, facing a tree as if listening to it. When we approached, she didn't react, not until we physically turned her around and guided her back. Even then, she moved like someone leading a puppet by invisible strings. She couldn't even explain what had happened. She kept repeating, "I wasn't supposed to turn around. I wasn't supposed to look," over and over like she was reciting instructions someone gave her. We see a lot of people end up in places they physically shouldn't be. A 3-year-old once disappeared during a family picnic. 2 hours later, he was found 6 miles away, up a rock hill that he could not have climbed even with gear. When we asked how he got there, he said, "The other boy carried me." "What other boy?" we asked. "The one who looked like me," he said. That's when I started noticing patterns. The quiet parts of the forest, the mimicry, the misplaced people, the sense that something was always just behind you, out of sight, but aware. Then there are the stairs. Oh my, the stairs. Every officer hears the same warning. If you see a staircase in the woods, don't touch it. Don't go near it. Don't talk about it. They rise out of the ground like they belong in a house, clean and untouched by dirt or time. Some look new, some look ancient, some are carpeted. They are always pristine, always silent. The first time I saw one, I thought it was a joke, a leftover prop from some ranger activity. But when I mentioned it at the station, the room went dead quiet. No one looked at me. No one answered. Finally, one of the older guys pulled me aside. "Don't violate the 50-foot rule," he said. "Don't climb them, don't touch them, don't even stare at them for too long." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because people who do don't come back right, if they come back at all." That was the end of the conversation. I've seen 4 sets of stairs in my career, each one in a place where something else had already gone wrong. Missing people, strange footprints, silent woods. Once, I swear I saw a man standing at the top of one, just for a second, but then, when I blinked, he was gone. The weirdest case I had ever worked was the one that still keeps me up at night. We were searching for a hiker who'd gone missing on a trail known for sudden fog. Radio contact kept breaking. The woods felt different, like the air was heavier, pressing against my neck. We found the hiker's backpack near a creek, torn open like an animal got into it. But the rips were too clean, too straight. No claw marks, no blood. We spread out. I walked alone for maybe 10 minutes before the forest went silent, completely silent. Then, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, hand on my radio, but what stepped between the trees wasn't the hiker. It was me. Same jacket, same boots, same height, same face, but the skin didn't sit right, like it was borrowed. It stared at me with my own eyes, wide and unblinking, head tilted like an animal examining prey. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, just a stretch of skin pulling too far, tearing slightly at the corners of the mouth, as if it wasn't made for talking. Then, in a voice, scraping and broken, it whispered, "Help me." It sounded wrong, too deep, too low, like my voice, but slowed down and flipped backwards. My radio cracked suddenly, loud in the silence. The creature flinched, not back, forwards, towards me. I ran. I don't remember how I reached the others. I don't remember what I said. I just remember the look on the senior officer's face when I tried to explain. He didn't say it was impossible. He didn't say I had imagined it. He just said, "It's learning." We never ended up finding that hiker. Sometimes I hear things when I patrol alone. Footsteps matching mine, breathing just out of rhythm with my own. The voice calling my name from farther down the trail. There are things in the woods we aren't meant to understand. Things older than us, smarter than us. Things that watch us every time we step between the trees. And every year, search and rescue loses a few more people. Not just hikers, officers. When rookies ask me what they should know before their first rescue, I tell them the truth. If you hear something that sounds like a person, keep walking. If you see something that looks like you, run. And if you find a staircase in the woods, don't even look at it. Just pray you're not already too close. The end. I really like that. I really like how it was kind of in an anthology type of a deal, so that it kind of gave us a bunch of little bites. I know that if you're interested, that was a part 1 to a story. So, yeah, you can just go to Reddit and check out the rest of the uploads. I would assume by the username being the Forest Ranger guy that they probably upload a lot of these stories. But yeah, it's super cool. I think initially what kind of stands out to me is kind of some of the similarities between these stories and what are referred to as, I remember it being called like the missing 411 cases. There's a lot of great YouTube videos on that, especially by the Lore Lodge. I love their videos on that. It's kind of just a lot of people who've disappeared over the years throughout national parks, and this is in reality. And there's just truly not a way to explain it. Whether it's a child that disappears like this and is found miles and miles away, or, somebody just disappears and that's that. They're just gone. But whatever it is, there's always something just wrong about it. It's a 411 because it just doesn't add up. It doesn't quite amount to a kidnapping. It doesn't really amount to a murder. It just is weird. People just go missing without a trace, it seems. Now, I personally love the woods. I'm an Eagle Scout, and if you don't know what that means, it's basically I went camping a lot and learned how to tie knots and campfires and stuff like that. So I would say I'm pretty well equipped to be outdoors. So I love camping. I love the prospect of being a park ranger. That sounds so awesome to me, just kind of exploring everywhere all the time, and then just, if anybody gets lost, then you go look for them, right? So on the one hand, I can think of awesome mountains and valleys and rivers and waterfalls and things and say, wow, that's such a cool idea. And then I think of all of the critters that might be out there, like in this story. Any skinwalkers or wendigos, or even just a bear or a disgruntled moose. There is a lot out there that will get us. With that being said, if there's a lesson to be taken away from this story, I think what stands out to me the most is when the park ranger was talking to the senior rangers, and they kind of gave him a set of rules, and they told him what to do and what not to do, and then he made an effort to pass it on to the rookie cops or the rookie rangers. I think that in our society there's a lot of thought that the generation that came before us kind of screwed us over, and so we need to try so desperately to get ahead that we end up either inadvertently or advertently screwing over the next generation. I think there's not enough people in the world that are willing to dig in a little bit extra and do a little bit of extra work so that the person who follows after us doesn't have more, but has less. I once had a job where I was taking a lot of notes in specific areas and then getting transferred around a lot. And sometimes you get into an area and work the area and you just would not have anything. There'd be no notes on anything. There'd be basically no help at all, because the last people just committed it all to memory and then took it with them when they left. But I would always try to kind of make an effort to write everything down that I thought was worth remembering. And I know that when it came time to it, much later, there was people who would randomly come up to me and say, hey, I really appreciate you for doing that. So, if not just for the appreciation, I think that's such a wonderful thing to do. If you can think of, if you ever desire to have kids in the future, or, if you're surrounded by people who are younger than you even, would you want to work a little bit extra harder so that they don't have to work so hard? Would you be willing to do that? Or would you want to take a little extra for yourself and disadvantage them? Because truly the choice is up to you. It doesn't matter what the choice was made before you, and it doesn't matter the choice that will be made after you. But you have a choice in front of you. I think that's why it's so important to, again, be so intentional with our lives, be intentional with where we're headed, be intentional with the impact that we're going to leave behind. We can very quickly and very easily become sort of like a kamikaze fighter, spiraling out of control, not even realizing that we are hitting loads of stuff on our way down. But hey, once we're gone, right? Well, I don't really think about it like that way. But what I do think is, even if we were to just disappear and be gone after we die, I don't think that's very good of a justification for just not caring about what comes next, or what comes after us, or taking care of what we've been given. Did y'all think of anything different for the lesson for today's story? Please, if you did, let me know down in the comments below. Now, was there anything different that we could have done in the story here? I think the protagonist did a lot of good things. I think running from the skinwalker dude instead of just staying there and watching it for a little bit longer was a smart idea. I think a lot of the kind of anthology stories in this bit, or in this Reddit story, were more so kind of almost like an index log of crazy things that have happened in the forest. And so it really was only that kind of one or two experiences that have actually happened to him. So I think in those experiences he did good. And in the others, I think he did a really good job of explaining for who might come after. And with that, you've survived till the end of the video. What did you think of the stories? Did you see any common themes? Do you think everyone might benefit from learning one or two things? Did you like the lessons I pointed out? Were you scared? Please, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I appreciate you all. I love you all. Again, I'm CC. And please, consider subscribing for more daily content similar to this. And with that, for now, goodbye.